technology use for all children. It is now my pleasure to introduce NTIA Administrator and Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information, Ariel Roth, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Emma. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. As I mentioned in my remarks last week when we launched this effort, the issue of excessive screen time is one that is deeply personal. I'm a mom of 6 kids, and like so many parents, I struggle almost every day to monitor and limit my kids' internet and screen use. It's hard enough with so much cultural pressure to be constantly online, but it's even more of a challenge when screens have become inescapable at school and so much assigned homework is screen-based. The public debate often focuses on banning cell phones in schools, and while that's important, it only scratches the surface. When you talk to most parents, their concern isn't just cell phones, it's that their children are on school laptops, devices, and digital curricula and platforms for large portions of the school day, starting at very young ages. This accelerated during COVID when remote learning pushed the entire school day onto a screen. But what began as an emergency response has now in many places become the baseline. I think we should be asking what's driving these trends. That includes looking at how federal rules, policies, and funding streams may be accelerating excessive screen use in the classroom. For example, federal programs designed to expand technology use in schools may not always align with what's best for children's education or well-being. We should be honest about whether and to what extent such programs help students, or whether they're being driven by the interests of the lobbyists and companies that ultimately benefit from the subsidies. Technology has a role in education, of course, but it should support learning, not fuel distraction or unhealthy habits. That is what today's listening session is designed to explore. We want a clear picture of how technology is being used in school, the consequences for kids' health, development, and learning, and how parents can be empowered on their children's screen use. We want to understand the commercial incentives in the ed tech marketplace, how procurement decisions are made, and how federal programs and policies may be influencing those choices. We also want to hear about the treatment of children's data by ed tech platforms, including how and to what extent such data is shared with third parties. I want to be clear that NTIA is not setting education policy. That is not our role, but NTIA does have a responsibility for evaluating whether federal connectivity policies and programs are supporting healthy, effective outcomes. We are also uniquely positioned to convene agencies, experts, and advocates at the intersection of technology policy and children's well-being. I want to express my deep gratitude to our partners across the administration who have helped shape this effort. Thank you to Dr. Herodopoulos and her team who have been diligently advancing research on children's technology use in coordination with the Office of the Surgeon General, as well as colleagues across HHS. I also want to acknowledge the partnership of colleagues from the Department of Education and the expertise they bring on this subject. I am also grateful for the engagement from the offices of the First and Second Lady. I want to thank Sarah Gazarek and Wendy Lev for attending today and for their support as this effort moves forward. We value their interest in this issue and look forward to continuing the conversation with them. Thank you to NTIA's expert policy team, Emma Lanso, Rafi Goldberg, Christopher Quarles, and Jaysha Ray for their amazing work and dedication pulling this effort together. And last but not least, thank you to the parents, teachers, students, and experts joining us today to illuminate what is happening on the ground and help us understand how federal policy is shaping children's screen use, as well as the potential and demonstrated effects on their development and well-being. Our priority today is to listen. I look forward to hearing from our speakers today and working with all of you on an approach to screen use that puts children, their well-being, and their education first. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary Roth. We are also delighted to welcome our Health and Human Services colleague, Acting Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor in the Office of the Surgeon General, Dr. Stephanie Herodopoulos. Dr. Herodopoulos, over to you.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Assistant Director Roth. It was a true honor to get the phone call from your office to say we'd love to collaborate on such an important issue to the health and safety of our children in our nation. So I can't think of a better thing to work on. And just to give you a little background on me, I'm a family medicine physician, practiced in Florida for over 2 decades, and I am a mother of three. So I totally get what Assistant Director Roth is talking about, although she's got me by double with the children. But I don't know how you do it. You are Superwoman. But what I could tell you is that, in the MAHA strategic plan that was released by the White House from the commission, our office of the Surgeon General, was actually tasked with coming up with a screen time document regarding the harms to children and how much screen time. So we are actively working on that. So I'm really glad that we could dovetail together on this issue as it relates to your department and mine. So I thank you, Commerce and NTIA staff, for inviting me to participate. And from the Office of the Nation's Doctor, as we communicate about disease prevention and harm reduction and health promotion, the first we know it to understand listening is the first thing we need to do. We go around and we listen, and that's what good physicians must do. And so this is a wonderful first step to hear what the external stakeholders and policymakers are thinking on this issue first before any document is drafted. And there is emerging scientific evidence that are providing more details about the harm of excessive screen time as we are even sitting here right now. I mean, it's a very popular topic: social media use in tweens and teens, and mental health and general well-being. We've seen some research talk about implementing cell phone bans or restrictions can positively impact academic performance, and limiting cell phone can lead to improved focus, reduced distractions, and better overall academic outcomes. And you're right, this is only scratches the surface of what we need to be concentrating on. But recent studies have shown that 1 hour of school time is unfortunately utilized by teens using social media during the school hour. That's 1 hour less that they're concentrating on what they should be learning. So it definitely is a distraction. So for sure, I just want to let you know, recently I attended a federal school safety task force. It's an interagency task force regarding a few different themes, safety of school and children, but one of the themes as it pertains to cell phones and screen time related to mental health with its SAMHSA. So there'll be a compendium document that eventually will be released as a guidelines and best practices for administrators and school districts to follow going forward, and you'll see that coming out of their office. So, but we've been monitoring the developments very closely, and we will of course, educate you as we know more. There's actually been another study showing social media detox regimen that actually is extremely helpful for a recalibration of mental health. We know more hits on social media changes some of the wiring of the brain as it relates to dopamine and getting actually addicted to it in screen time. So that is an addiction. And so this is something that we're working on, but we look forward to, out of our office, as we've been having, I think, a biweekly cadence with you, collaborating with parents and teachers and students, NTIA and other federal partners and public health stakeholders and policymakers to develop and widely share information about this important issue facing our young people. So thank you for the entree, and I'm looking forward to listening. Remember, God gives us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and so short speeches so we can listen more and hear what's on everybody's minds. So thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Herodopoulos. The Office of the Surgeon General has been a great partner, and we're really glad to have you and colleagues here today. So yes, let's get into today's discussion. A few housekeeping notes up front. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be posted online following today's session. It's a public session, and the record will also be public. You can view the recording later on at ntia.gov. Automated closed captioning is available for those of you using the Teams application, if that's of use to you. If you are planning to speak, we ask that you please update your display name to reflect your full name and affiliation so that we can keep accurate notes of who is saying what. If you would like to speak, please use the Teams raised hand function, or if you're dialing in by phone, press *5 to raise and lower your hand. Please keep your hand raised until I call on you. Right now, everyone's mics and video features are disabled, but when it is your turn to speak, we will enable your mic and video. You will still need to unmute yourself and decide whether you want to turn your camera on or not. So we will enable you to unmute, but you still will need to click unmute in order to speak so that we can hear you. For folks dialing by phone, if it's your turn to speak, press *6 to unmute yourself. We also ask if you could identify yourself and your org before speaking. That would also help everyone listening to just understand who it is that they're hearing from at any given time. We are going to have to limit remarks to 3 minutes maximum, given the really robust attendance that we have for today's session. We are going to unfortunately have to be pretty strict about that. And we are going to give preference later on in the event to speakers who have not spoken yet. So we have 3 key topics, which maybe we can show on our agenda slide. But please think strategically about what topic you most want to weigh in on, because we are going to try to get to as many people one time around as possible as we can. We've already got a healthy queue already for the first topic, so please join me in making sure that we can hear from everyone. And as a reminder, if you're unable to join the queue or you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please email kids@ntia.gov. That's kids@ntia.gov for any technical assistance. So without further ado, we're going to begin our discussion on our first topic on the impact of excessive screen time in schools. We are really interested in hearing anything that you have to share with us, but in particular, the potential or demonstrated effects of education technology on children's mental health or well-being, their educational attainment. And we're really interested to hear about that broken out by age group as well. We understand that, elementary age school versus middle school versus older students in high school may have very different experiences and risks and benefits associated. We're also really interested to hear about guidelines that exist on age-appropriate best practices for screen time in educational settings, and a number of other topics that we'd love to hear from. But to get us started with a first intervention, I'm going to hand the virtual mic first over to Dr. Jared Cooney-Horvath from Learning Made Easy Global. Dr. Horvath.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. And it's lovely to be here. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Jared. For those who don't know me, I'm a teacher turned neuroscientist. So my focus is on human learning. So you can probably talk about tech in schools. I'm going to be talking about the learning angle. The well-being, the personal developmental stuff is really important. I think you all know that better than me, so that will come later. But what about the learning? So we were just talking about banning cell phones from schools. Awesome first step, but that doesn't address much of anything, because 88% of school districts right now still supply kids with one-to-one computers, and that number is going up, which means over half of our kids spend between 1 and 4 hours looking at a screen for learning purposes during a day, and over 25% of our kids spend over 4 hours looking at a screen per day. Now, all that would be good, but it turns out that the statistics show only about 24 to 38 minutes of each of those hours will be off task. Kids can use these tools, these screens, these tablets to do the exact same things they're doing on phones, and they do. Almost 60% of every hour they're spent learning, even with a teacher present helping them on the machine, they will be doing something other than learning. And for that reason, Gen Z is the first generation in recorded history to score worse than their parents on every major cognitive test that we have. Since we've been recording cognitive measures since the early 1900s, every generation has outperformed their parents until now. Our kids have worse memories, worse attention, lower general IQ, worse creative thinking, worse critical thinking, and all of this has been documented, a decline since 2002. And the biggest culprit is the tools we are using in schools. When we remove the tech and go back to analog methods, surprise, surprise, learning, reading comprehension, creativity, mathematics, all those things start to go back up. And in fact, believe it or not, when we remove tech from schools, digital literacy scores also go up. So we don't even need to be teaching kids on these tools about these tools. When you learn about life and then you bring the tool in later, kids seem to be able to use the tool versus when we focus all our effort on trying to figure out how to use this thing. So I just want to point out, as things go forward today, we have data starting in 1962 showing that digital technology, you put a screen in front of a kid, learning goes down. It is not as effective as human learning. We also, over the last 25 years, have developed a lot of biological reasons why, the mechanisms behind why these things happen. We know the body reacts to reading in these ways. The body reacts to writing in these ways. This is why analog would be better than digital. So we have enough data to show that tech is harming learning. We have all the mechanisms to explain why tech is harming learning. So the only leg tech proponents have to stand on now is promise, that these tools should be useful. I'm sorry, promise is not a solid enough foundation upon which we should be building educational foundations. Because something could be good, man, my shoe has a lot of promise to be awesome. Promise is what something isn't right now. And until these tools can prove efficacy, safety, usefulness, why are we continuing to run this experiment? So if you're ever interested in the data and stuff, just know it's there. I'm happy to help out, but I look forward to hearing what everyone else is going to share today as well. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Horvath. Next up, we will go to Emily Turkin. Emily, are you able to unmute?
Yes, I don't think if can.
Okay, I think we just lost Emily. We will keep an eye out for her when hopefully she can log back in. But in the meantime, let's keep things rolling, and I will turn to Keith Kruger.
Hello, Keith Kruger, CEO of COSN, the Consortium for School Networking. We're the nonprofit representation of chief technology officers and their teams in school districts. We appreciate this opportunity to participate in NTIA's session and welcome the opportunity to build on the insights that we contributed to NTIA's online health and safety task force back in 2023 and 2024. You know, families are rightly concerned about distraction, overexposure, and misuse of devices, and we agree that these concerns must be taken seriously and addressed thoughtfully. But as the National Association representing those thousands of school districts and millions of students, our organization brings real-world perspectives about how technology is deployed, managed, and used for learning. Our 2025 Screens in Balance report underscores that screen time is not a single category. Education screen time, built around curriculum and governed by district policies, is fundamentally different from unsupervised or recreational online activity. Unfortunately, these categories are often conflated, and we lose the nuance required for good policymaking and a clear understanding of what's happening in classrooms. Teachers rely on digital tools to differentiate instruction, assess learning, and support accessibility. Because districts vary widely in resources and student needs, decisions about device rules, screen time expectations, and instructional technology should be made locally by educators, school leaders, and parents, not a one-size-fits-all mandate. Digital literacy is now a foundational competency. Employers expect students to be fluent with digital collaboration tools, digital data literacy, and increasingly AI, which of course is also a priority for the Trump administration. Schools cannot prepare students for this reality without high-capacity, secure broadband and connected devices. Across the country, districts are demonstrating balanced technology use. Digital tools are used when they enhance learning, and non-digital methods are used when those are more effective. Strong professional development and clear communication with families reinforces purposeful use and healthy habits. Ultimately, investing in broadband and classroom technology is about investing in opportunity. With thoughtful local guardrails, technology becomes a bridge, not a barrier, and COSN looks forward to partnering with NTIA to support effective, responsible, locally driven digital learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. I am going to close the queue for this one. We've got another 13 hands raised, so that'll be it for topic one. We do have two other topics where folks can continue to weigh in. And I will go back to Emily Churkin, who was at the top of our queue and then got disconnected. So Emily, are you able to?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah, you're coming through
Okay.
clear.
Wonderful, thank you. My name is Emily Churkin. I'm on faculty at the University of Washington, and I just returned from London where I testified before Parliament about the harms of ed tech. I want to be clear up front, I take no funding from tech. My message to this body is simple. At its very core, ed tech is big tech, and both are fundamentally at odds with child development. I implore you to request funding disclosures from speakers today, especially those who are pushing more tech for children, because ed tech is breaking education. The products are inequitable, unsafe, and often funded by big tech. You need to be aware of the pro-ed tech messaging you hear today because much of this propaganda benefits tech companies and not children. EdTech will not close the achievement gap. It will widen it. The solution to overcrowded class sizes and teacher burnout is not more tech. More tech does not mean better learning. EdTech destroys focus, steals attention, and displaces relationships. Students need teachers, not technology. EdTech also creates new digital divides. Safer versions of EdTech cost more. Monetizing digital safety and privacy means under-resourced schools receive less safe versions of products. This means that privileged children will get human teachers and poor children will get chatbots. We need only look where technology executives themselves send their own children to nature-based low-tech schools to see the truth. Those who build and market their products for everyone else's children make starkly different choices for their own. EdTech products are unsafe. They rely on the internet to deliver their services, and the internet is not a safe place for children. In schools, kindergartners are handed iPads for learning and told to be responsible users, but developmentally speaking, children lack the cognitive ability to safely navigate the web or regulate their own screen use. But via school-issued devices, children can spend hours on YouTube, gaming, or when they aren't being exposed to pornography, pedophiles, suicide videos, or extremist content. Children's personal data is also collected via EdTech platforms and sold to third parties without informed parental consent. According to Internet Safety Labs, 96% of EdTech platforms sell children's data. I'm currently the lead plaintiff in a class action lawsuit that alleges these exact claims against PowerSchool, a $6 billion EdTech company owned by Bain Capital. Embedding generative AI tools into existing EdTech platforms further exposes children to newer and bigger risks. AI tutors are AI chatbots, and the emerging evidence of harm due to the use of chatbots by children is deeply concerning. Just as there is no such thing as a safe cigarette, there is no such thing as safe generative AI for children, despite the persuasive marketing you may hear. Don't fall for it. It is critical that this body sees the existential risk posed by giving such products to children and calling it education. The degradation of skills and risk to safety and privacy poses a direct threat to democracy itself, and we must ask why such tools are being given to children with vulnerable brains in the name of education in the first place. For nearly 2 decades now, we've been told that giving children laptops and internet access for school is progress. In fact, it is a giant step backwards. Thank you.
Very much, Emily. Now over to Lisa Klein.
Here I am.
Lisa, yes, there you are.
Good. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Ariel. My name is Lisa Klein, and I am a parent turned safe technology advocate. After watching educational technology infiltrate and basically infect the classrooms of my children and millions of others, I've learned a lot in the last 15 years about what kids haven't learned since screens became the norm between teacher and student. First, some context. Educational technology is huge business. It rakes in $340 billion a year. That's more than the casino industry, which is no coincidence because they both monetize dopamine cravings. Kahoot, Prodigy, Quizlet, they're all very cute little slot machines. Second, EdTech. Let's take Google specifically. Obviously is not credentialed to educate children. They are in the business of fast and easy. And they decided they could make $1 kajillion shortcutting education. So here's how that's working out. Math and reading skills are at their lowest in decades. Children who learn to write on computers struggle with memorization. And e-reading stunts reading stamina or the ability to sit still for sustained periods of time. Just 1 hour a day of screen time tanks scores a whole letter grade. And heavy users are 15% less likely to finish college. When you consider that the average kid is online just for fun about 7 hours a day and is then forced onto screens at school for another 5 or 6 hours, by age 18, they've lost 5.5 years of their existence to screen time. That's excessive by any standard and deprives our kids of healthy activities. Even prison inmates spend more time outside than our kids do today. So EdTech does not work. But why do schools think it does? Because the industry fabricates so-called proof. Pearson, for one, funded its own studies after an independent analysis by the United Nations, by the way, found that its products had no impact. So in short, EdTech is a Trojan horse. It's sneaking into schools, luring kids into games that are free at school, but subscription-based at home, and kneecapping the teaching profession in the process. They make up narratives to grab federal E-rate subsidies for Wi-Fi on school buses. Can you actually think of a worse idea than putting unsupervised internet access on a bus for kids who can barely tie their shoes? EdTech is so devious that it's created dozens of nonprofits cloaked as online safety organizations. Some of them are here today. Look closely, these guys are bankrolled by big tech. And frankly, they mock the work that unpaid people like myself do to educate parents about the research, the science, and the personal anecdotes about watching kids fail. 3 last words: books, paper, pencil. No one got rich off of them, but they worked. Thank you again for listening today.
Thank you, Lisa. Now over to Danny Bounds.
Can you hear me now? Great. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Danny Bounds, and I serve for the Council for Education Policy at the Software and Information Industry Association. And I just want to thank you all, the NTIA staff, for this opportunity to provide comments regarding the listening session on screen times and kids, and urge an exercise of caution when considering policies that could impact local decision-making on a child's education. While we recognize the importance of balanced technology use and support pedagogically sound use of technology, overly restricted and non-evidence-based screen time limitations on educational tools could significantly undermine student achievement and disproportionately harm students with disabilities who depend on education technology for equal access to education and learning. For example, rather than imposing strict time limits on digital media use, the American Academy of Pediatrics suggests on its website that parents and educators should prioritize the quality of these interactions over simply tracking the amount of time spent. We support this approach in considering screen time as quality over quantity, or active versus passive. And when technology is safely and actively integrated into the classroom through evidence-based educational tools, it transforms a potential distraction into an inclusive and powerful learning resource. This active use, leveraging laptops, tablets, and phones for purposes beyond passive consumption, makes education more accessible for students with various needs. Unlike passive screen time, which often involves simply viewing content, active engagement with education and technology is a targeted skills-based building approach that directly augments learning and teaching techniques, resulting in demonstrable educational benefits. We encourage the NTIA to distinguish between recreational screen time used outside of learning environment and the difference of purposeful education technology used in the classroom in any policy recommendations. Broad screen time restrictions risk creating a two-tiered system where some students can access educational content for learning and support while others cannot. We implore the NTIA to provide guidance that is safe and effective for children in classrooms. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny. And I just want to thank everyone for sticking to time. This is great. This is very thoughtful to all the other speakers. Denise Champney, over to you. And Denise, are you able to come off mute? We are not yet hearing you if you are speaking. So we may, if you're having technical difficulties with coming off of mute, your mic should be enabled so that you can unmute yourself. But if you're having trouble with that, could you please contact our staff, kids@ntia.gov. And in the meantime, we will move on to the next speaker since time is limited. So we will go over to Gretchen now.
Hello, can you see and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I can't see myself, but I didn't have anything prepared. I'm just going to tell you that I'm a parent of sophomores in a school district that became a one-to-one school district the year that they started kindergarten. I trusted that my school district knew what they were doing, and I found out that they didn't. I found out in second grade when my twins were each in separate classes, and every time I'd ask them, what'd you do for indoor recess? They said, we were on iPads. And I started asking more questions like, what kind of guardrails do we have in this district? Are the teachers informed of when they can use it and when they can't? Is anyone tracking how much time they're on the devices? The answer was no, no, no. Didn't know anything. Then I started eventually looking into some of these industry associations, tech industry, ed tech industry associations, like not academic teacher associations, but the teachers and administrators were going to these conferences, going to these trade shows, listening to people that were selling products and services to them. I looked up organizations like COSN, who spoke earlier. I looked up associations like ISTE. And what I saw was like webinars where they were teaching administrators how to push back on parents' concerns and teachers' concerns. Like, here's how to defend ed tech. That makes me very angry. I also found that National PTA was bankrolled by TikTok, Meta, Discord, and guess what? They still are. They're making millions, and they're a nonprofit. And I was a local PTA membership chairman, and they wouldn't tell me how much they made off of Meta to be part of their focus group and their roundtable. These are marketing strategies that these companies used. Then National PTA let them host safety webinars for parents. I'm sorry, but they're a pay to play. So I'm just giving examples of how this works. My kids are sophomores, as I said. You would think if they were given a device in kindergarten to use every single year to do their work on, that they would know how to keyboard or type. So when administrators say it's just a tool, why aren't they teaching them how to use a tool properly? I've also seen a lot of rudimentary apps labeled as educational. We all know that those that label apps are the app developers themselves. There is no regulating that's done like the movie industry, you know, has ratings for shows. They have a body that makes those kind of determinations. It shouldn't be the industry themselves. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing your perspectives, Gretchen. We're going to go back to Denise to see if we're able to hear you this time. Denise, can you try unmuting? All right, still not able to hear anything from Denise. So maybe you can sync with our team and possibly try using the dial-in and see if maybe that works better. But in the meantime, let's move on to Michelle Green. Great. Michelle, are you able to unmute?
Yes, I am able to unmute. I was trying to turn on my camera as well. Thank you so much for the time today. I really would like to appreciate to acknowledge just the NTIA administration, but as well as everybody who's here, because this is a critical conversation. And I am with Project Tomorrow. The Speak Up Research Project has been a powerful tool in giving families, as well as educators, administrators, and students an opportunity to bring their voice into all kinds of conversations around educational technology as well as learning in general. In fact, Project Tomorrow's mission and our vision is to ensure that today's students are well prepared to be tomorrow's innovators, leaders, and engaged citizens of the world. And we believe that's through authentic learning experiences, enabling all students to develop skills and mindsets for the future. What I'd like to share with you today are some of the key Speak Up findings from the 24-25 school year. And this is really a very broad sweep. If anybody would like more information, we would be more than happy to share in depth. But what I'd like to share is that students themselves are telling us what they need. They believe that technology helps them to learn independently. They want to collaborate with their peers and apply knowledge to real problems. It's not about passive consumption, although those are very valid concerns. Families tell us that they value educational technology's potential, and I'm going to stress this because I've already heard this, and I know you have too, while seeking greater transparency about its use in their children's daily learning. What students are telling us they want is to recognize or to have us recognize that technology enables their self-directed learning. It's the number one skill that they value and want to develop as they are going through school, and this is across all grade levels. We know that students are more interested in tools that facilitate creation, collaboration, and communication. Parents want ed tech, they value that, but they do need that clearer communication. 70% of parents that have participated in Speak Up say effective technology implementation is important or extremely important to their children's success. However, only 68% report understanding how technology is actually used in their children's classrooms, and nearly half are concerned that their children are spending too much time using technology. When nearly 1/3 of parents lack visibility into their children's daily technology use at school, families cannot make fully informed decisions about overall screen time use. We believe that parents, from the findings, prioritize foundational infrastructure. When asked to design their ideal school, parents overwhelmingly prioritize fundamental technology infrastructure. Universal access is non-negotiable. 69% of parents rate a device for every student as being helpful. Parents strongly value tools that connect students to teachers and enable collaborative project. They see technology's greatest potential in strengthening relationships and teamwork, not replacing human interaction. Parents observe specific learning benefits. They see the impact of educational technology as standing out in three particular ways: applying knowledge to practical problems, learning at their own pace, and improving critical thinking and problem-solving skills. These are core academic outcomes, and families tell us that they value them. Most families, 84%, do limit their children's personal screen time outside of school. Parents distinguish being between educational and their personal device use, but managing total screen time is, as I mentioned earlier, a challenge. And it's important that schools are involving parents with how technology is being used. Finally, just grounding policy decisions in the voices of millions of students and parents, we can ensure that technology serves learning in ways that both support student success and addresses legitimate concerns. Thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Next, we'll go to Jonathan Butcher.
Thank you. Thank you to NTIA. My name is Jonathan Butcher, and I am the acting director of the Center for Education Policy at the Heritage Foundation. I am a former and current school board member as well as a parent. So first, limiting or prohibiting cell phone use in schools is a bipartisan policy issue, from Republican Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida to New York Governor Hochul, to surveys of teacher union members in favor of limiting or ending student cell phone use in schools. There is widespread support. Policymakers and parents should recognize that this issue is something with widespread agreement. Secondly, there are negative effects on young people from the use of social media, which comes from few restrictions on cell phone use, especially in schools. In particular, the hypersensitivity to others' opinions, and in general, teachers report that cell phones are an unwelcome distraction in classrooms, as well as the research that's already been cited here. Third, critics who say that students will not be able to report emergencies during the school day miss key details about the way that students use cell phones. For example, the school safety consulting firm called the National School Safety and Security Services says that cell phones allow students to call in threats to their own school or others. It also can complicate responses when there is an emergency and students need to be following teacher instructions and not looking at their phones as they try to exit a building. In terms of solutions, there should be collaboration between local policymakers and state policymakers to determine the limits. Bell-to-bell restrictions are ideal, but there may be unique cases, less frequent but still important, say cases of older students who may be earning a GED and have a job or children of their own and may need access to a phone. Nevertheless, these restrictions and prohibitions are essential today when it comes to cell phone use in schools. Finally, and talking about the horizon of education technology in schools, AI holds promise for the creation of lesson plans and sniffing out cheating and plagiarism on student assignments. But as an instructional tool, we simply do not have enough research on the impacts of AI to safely recommend or use AI as an academic tool. We must proceed with caution on the use of AI in classrooms. The evidence of bias, hallucinations, and inaccuracy calls for more research and careful limitations in academic use before widespread adoption across subjects. Thank you again to NTIA for the listening session and the chance to share.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. We are going to go back to Denise Champney again. Try this one more time and see if reconnecting helps with your microphone issues. Denise, are you able to speak? Unfortunately, still not hearing anything from Denise. All right. In the interest of time, I'm sorry, Denise, I think we're going to move on again to the next person in our list, who is Annie Chestnut Tudor.
Hello, my name is Annie Chestnut Tudor. I am a policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation's Center for Technology and the Human Person. I would like to share some findings from my report, B is for broadband, and my public comment to the Department of Education's proposed rulemaking on advancing AI in education. Both of these can be found on Heritage's website. The FCC has spent a shockingly large amount of taxpayer money connecting three-year-olds to 5-year-olds to the internet. In some cases, it has provided over $20,000 per month per preschool. This amount grossly exceeds the market rate of advertised business broadband rates, which reportedly run between $250 to $350 per month, raising serious questions about the E-rate program's integrity and susceptibility to waste, fraud, and abuse. It's unclear what pedagogical impact this spending has, apart from increasing internet and screen use among children and their caregivers. What is clear is that the primary beneficiaries of E-rate's unchecked expansion are not students, not kids, but tech companies, telecom providers, consultants, and perhaps faculty who can now download large files and videos, educational or not, at much faster speeds. Preschoolers need less screen time, not more. The preschool years are crucial for children's development of both gross and fine motor skills. Gross motor skills, such as running and jumping, help to build physical coordination, while fine motor skills, such as drawing shapes, using utensils, catching or throwing a ball, enhance dexterity and control. Screen-based activities are sedentary and trigger dopamine responses that encourage passive consumption rather than active play and exploration, which are essential for early development. In fact, excessive screen time may dull cognitive and linguistic development and emotional maturity. The administration needs to apply the lessons learned from the wasteful spending, fraud, and abuse in the FCC's application of telecom subsidies to any grants or subsidies for artificial intelligence or other educational technology platforms. Federal funds must not be giveaways to the tech industry, which is all too eager to secure customers for life, starting with the most vulnerable and impressionable in society. Any adoption of AI in education should form for the advancement of tech ed over ed tech. Tech ed focuses on teaching fundamentals of the technology and the skills needed to use it. Ed tech, on the other hand, is a form of pedagogy that relies on technology to teach and forces adoption of the technology. The social media experiment has failed children. The consequences of that failure are undeniable. Rising rates of anxiety, depression, social isolation among youth directly correlate with social media and screen time adoption. The interactive and engaging design of consumer AI platforms mirror consuming and addictive design features of social media and can actually be worse because of their features that engage directly with users, such as with the AI chatbot platforms. Thank you, Assistant Secretary Roth, for holding this session.
Great. Thank you so much, Annie. Now we're on to Faith Colson.
Hi, my name is Faith Colson, and I'm speaking today as a mom, although I have years of professional experience advocating for and writing education policy as a national abuse prevention expert. I understand nuance and complexity and the need to address the reality in schools and not write blanket rules that oversimplify things. However, pro-tech voices accuse parents of not understanding the difference between educational devices and recreational ones. Digital devices in schools are harming kids not because they're supposed to be recreational, but because they are connected to the internet. The fact that they are supposed to support education does not prevent children from using them for recreation. Teachers cannot police internet use and teach at the same time. I know this because my husband's a teacher. Filtering is not preventing porn access because kids use proxy servers. YouTube is letting obscene materials into junior high classrooms. Kids are using devices in bathrooms and playing on them instead of eating lunch. I'm not talking about phones, I'm talking about Chromebooks issued by the school. Parents have no opt-out, teachers have no opt-out. I will share anecdotal details from across my children and their schools to show how bad this has gotten. At one school, a student who had medical restrictions on screen time had up to 2 hours a day of unstructured instructional time when other kids were on gamified supplemental educational apps. This is in addition to direct instruction and individual work time. This is just the time filler each day. Porn has been accessed during the school day in a classroom with a teacher present. User agreements acknowledge that schools know kids can access harmful material or strangers online, and they put all liability on children and parents who cannot opt out of device use. When I brought up obscene material that was accessed on the school device, I was told that my child would be punished for trying to access it, and the school would take no responsibility trying to block it because kids had to learn eventually. Online standardized testing has induced online unit tests and online instruction to the point where children who have a legitimate educational need to learn off screen cannot be accommodated because teachers do not have the ability to detach from screens. This is not a matter of screens increasing learning for children with diverse needs. That can be done with or without screen time limits. This is a matter of screens replacing teachers and making it impossible for children with diverse needs to be taught, even with federal protections under IDEA and medical and academic data supporting the need to learn off screen. Screens are simply too embedded for teachers to teach without them, even if they want to. Pro-tech voices have brought up screen time limits preventing local control, but child safety is not a matter of local control. All schools are being forced to use tech to some degree, so all schools need safeguards in place. Parents can't opt out, so schools need standards for the sake of child health. Some schools use tech judiciously, but without rules. Other schools basically give kids a screen all day. If balance and intention are what tech companies supposedly support, then why do tech companies oppose any limits? Is it balanced and intentional for tech to be used all day, for educational games to be used as filler time? Is it balanced and intentional for kids to carry devices 24/7 when they can swap tabs, watch movies, talk to chatbots, use AI to cheat, access porn, access vulgar content, talk to strangers on school devices, use unmonitored email accounts as elementary students, use the camera in the bathroom, and Google answers on online tests and then be punished for it, even though the teachers aren't monitoring? None of this is balanced or intentional, and setting limits is not making blanket rules that will prevent learning. It's preventing child harm in schools where they are it's compulsory attendance with kids who cannot protect themselves. The bottom line is that educational tech may be intended to educate, but the hardware used exposes kids to harm because the internet was not made for children. Regardless of any good intentions, kids are not following user agreements. They are following instant gratification, and it's up to the adults in the room to stop them. The only way to do that is to stop handing them a device all day and put teachers in charge of handing devices out for limited periods and collecting them back so that they can be used to enhance education, not replace it, and to not harm children. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Faith. Now we're on to Claire Morell.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, I will be brief because I know others have already shared a lot of my comments. I come at this as a mom, also as an author of the book, The Tech Exit, which an entire chapter really focused on getting screens out of schools. So I just want to briefly mention the two main issues with EdTech in schools is distraction and then undermining learning and skill development. So many people have mentioned how distracting these screens are from actual learning, that kids are often playing video games or other children are even watching pornography. Common Sense Media found nearly a third of teens, 1 in 3, have viewed pornography during the school day. And of those teens, 44% viewed it on a school-issued device. The teachers struggle to stay on top of it. The IT departments can't block the sites, and parents can't install their own filters on the school-issued devices. And so quite simply, the smartphone bans, these amazing policies we're seeing in schools, are just not as effective if kids can still access social media, video games, and pornography on their EdTech devices during the school day. The second thing is that it's undermining student learning. The one-to-one laptop, one-to-one device policy has not worked out. Instead, student math, reading, and science scores have all been on the decline in the United States since 2012. And in 2022, these scores were the lowest seen since the 1970s. Neuroscience studies are increasingly showing us why this is the case. They find that students who read texts on computers do not comprehend the text as deeply as students who read it on paper. Even just recently, Columbia University found evidence that children's brains process written text more deeply when it's in print rather than on a digital screen, and then they form stronger reading circuits. And so this is really fundamental to our children developing full literacy, is that they're not going to be able to do that if they're primarily taking in content through the screen instead of on paper. I also just want to say that kids with autism and ADHD are especially disadvantaged by EdTech screens. They're more dysregulating for children with these conditions, and parents really struggle to opt out of these school devices. They are pushed on parents. It's very disempowering. You can set your own screen use in your own home, but then parents have no oversight or authority of their kids and screens at school. And to the industry groups, I just want to briefly say, you need to prove to us that these screens improve student learning. Those studies don't exist. It's only studies that show why these screens are undermining student learning, and the results speak for themselves. Educational attainment and educational scores and outcomes have not been increasing since the push for EdTech in the classroom. They've all been decreasing. And if we truly want to teach kids tech skills like using computers as tools, a school can have a computer lab or computer class. But the point is that the screens are not teaching kids the tech skills they need, but teaching them how to be distracted and to skim instead of reading deeply. And it's just undermining their learning and thinking when it's used as the medium for all subjects and classes. We haven't even talked too much about AI, but I'm concerned the increasing push for AI in education is only going to further exacerbate these problems. And because even instead of skimming on a screen, now the AI will just summarize reading for students and short circuit the process of them doing their own problem solving. I want to end just though by saying the government really has a role to play in solving this screen time in schools crisis. And unfortunately, the government can either hurt or help. I think someone else mentioned the FCC's E-rate program that spends billions to push broadband internet into schools. And unfortunately, under the Biden FCC, they expanded that program into subsidizing Wi-Fi on school buses and distributing Wi-Fi hotspots to kids. I mean, how maddening for parents if you've put all these filters and controls on your internet at home or their devices, and then they can just get a hotspot checked out from school, thanks to government funding, and access whatever they want. And so these expansions created serious risks for kids. Now, thankfully, to the Senate CRA, led by Chairman Cruz, and efforts by the Trump FCC, those harmful policies were reversed. But it's important we continue to scrutinize this $4 billion a year E-rate program to ensure it's benefiting children and not merely pushing more internet and screen use into schools. And on the contrary, I would love to see more restrictions on these federal funding programs to schools to say that if schools want to receive this funding, they should block social media access, block social media platforms and porn sites on any school Wi-Fi or school devices. And so that is the charge I leave you all with, is that I think we can do a lot better when it comes to protecting kids from the harms of screens in our schools. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Claire. And just to touch base on our agenda, we'll have two more speakers in this under topic 1, Justice Swan and Dr. Zainab Akolo, and then we will move on to topic 2 and 3, which we will try to address in a fairly condensed amount of time. So if you are hoping to speak on the questions around funding and the role of subsidies and the effect on the marketplace in topic 2, or in topic 3 about data privacy and security, please be sure to raise your hand appropriately for those topics. We also are going to be able to hold the session open for another half hour after our original scheduled end time. We will try to hit both of topics 2 and 3 in that last half hour, because I know people have planned their days around the originally announced time, but we will keep the line open so that we can hear from folks for as long as we can, because we know a lot of folks are here and want to share their views with us. But for now, to help us wrap up with topic 1, I'm going to turn it over to Justice Swan.
Hey guys, I'm Justice Swan. I work for the Center for Innovative Teaching, Research, and Learning at a University of California. As you can see, it's very beautiful here. I want to, now everyone has already said all the science that I was going to say. Kind of took the wind out of my sails, which is unfortunate. So instead, I'm going to talk about my personal experience in a K-12 school in Maryland and how the teachers there impacted me on a personal level by sharing with me their passions, their loves, their joys, what they wanted to do in this world. I took many classes that were the first to be offered: a hip hop history and culture class, AP African American history, a sociology class that was invented, and even the classes that were basic, like my history class, like my AP Lang class. I ended up fighting my teacher with a ruler doing Shakespeare. These are the kind of things that EdTech can never replace. And the science backs this up. As people have been saying, well, not as people have been saying, but as has been said in some of the books that people have written, which I have had the chance to skim over, relations between teachers and students is the most important factor in learning. It's just how it works. When you have a personal investment as a student with a teacher, you create this positive, virtuous cycle of learning and of caring and wanting to be engaged with that material. If we close the door to that with students being on attention maximizing apps and the gamification of learning and so on and so forth, teachers are also going to take a step back. They're going to say, well, the students aren't doing anything. They're just using AI for all the answers. They're just looking down at their phones all the time. All I see is a hunched neck. And they are more likely to disengage as well. So you have this widening of trust, this widening of understanding between the two, That's what I try to address in my job here, even at a higher education university. But you're still fighting an uphill battle. And as long as the technology and the myths about how good that technology is, the ideology that we're perpetrating into people of skimming and then to summarizing to uphold this faster and faster and faster economic logic that we live under, nothing's going to change. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much, NTIA, for holding this public comment section and for everybody for speaking their opinions. It really matters that people care about this.
Thank you so much, Justice. And now we will go to Dr. Zainab Okolo from the JED Foundation.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to present today. My name again is Dr. Zainab Okolo. I'm the Senior Vice President for Policy at the JED Foundation, a national nonprofit that focuses on protecting youth mental health and suicide prevention for our young adults. JED works closely with schools and districts across the country, and we see directly how technology shapes and has shaped student well-being daily. As schools and states reconsider how phones, devices, and platforms shape the school day, it's important to underscore and understand that screen use is fundamentally a mental health and safety issue. It affects emotional regulation, development, stress, focus, and a young person's ability to seek help in person first. And first, on the impacts of excessive screen use, we've already covered this on many of the fantastic testimonies today, but research is clear that unstructured, constant screen use elevates cognitive load, distractibility, fatigue, and stress. Media multitasking reduces working memory, which underpins attention and coping. Students also tell us that notifications, platform switching, and digital academic demands contribute significantly to pressure throughout the school day. From a mental health perspective, heavy screen use reduces face-to-face interaction with peers and trusted adults. Those informal touch points are essential to protective factors for developing emotional well-being and suicide prevention overall. It also is true that certain digital tools are helpful. So access to schedules and assignments, translation to accessible tools, and well-being designed apps can support students, but these benefits come with structured limited use functions and do not replace the need for in-person engagement. And the evidence is consistent that when technology use is intentional, time-bound, and developmentally aligned, benefits increase. However, when it's unstructured or poorly implemented, harm use arises, and we've used some of those examples today already. Secondly, the national pandemic really exacerbated the need to expand one-to-one device use and digital platforms rapidly. And these investments were needed at the time, but they also created a long-term commitment without us really considering the impacts on mental health. So procurement decisions have often been driven by costs and timelines rather than the developmental appropriateness, distraction potential, privacy protections, or emotional experiences of our students and our young adults. And districts routinely tell us that they need clearer criteria for more resources to evaluate digital tools, understand their impact on stress and attention and learning, and rebalance device use throughout the day, provided that those digital literacy trainings are available to both faculty and students. And then third, student data privacy is now inseparable from mental health and safety. Many EdTech tools collect detailed behavioral data, and AI-enabled features increasingly revise personal and emotionally sensitive disclosures from students. We have seen instances where this information was used to expose ways in which families did not expect, and to expose students to information that they are just developmentally not in the place to have access to. So clear federal expectations around data minimization, secondary use, AI data training, and escalation pathways and transparency are drastically needed. Excessive unstructured screen use can undermine attention, connection, and emotional well-being, and districts want to respond, but they cannot do so without clear federal and state guidelines funding that supports those guidelines, and a clear reflection on what students actually need to grow and lead fulfilling lives. So thank you to NTIA for this opportunity to speak. And the JED Foundation looks forward to continuing to support conversations like this as we think about the guardrails that keep student well-being and wellness at the center of our conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Okolo. So now we are going to turn to our topics 2 and 3. We're going to put kind of both of them on the table, one after another. Our second topic that we're focused on is really the market for EdTech. How do schools make procurement decisions? What is the role of funding for communications infrastructure and devices in schools? And we're really, very curious about how tech companies market their products to schools. How do schools vet EdTech services before purchase and deployment? We've already heard a lot on these topics, especially from the parents' perspective. But to kick us off on this topic, I'm going to hand the virtual mic over to Professor Daniel Lyons from Boston College Law School. Professor Lyons, over to you.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. So my name is Daniel Lyons. I'm a professor at Boston College Law School. I can't speak to the effects of excessive screen time, although anecdotally as a parent, I've seen downsides to the teen digital environment. And as an educator, I can say that online learning is often inferior to traditional in-person instruction. But what I can speak to is the ways that government subsidies are shaping this issue. And I want to focus in particular on the E-rate program. So when Congress created E-rate in 1996, only 14% of classrooms were online, and home broadband was still emerging. The program's purpose was straightforward. Let's bring advanced telecommunications and information services to schools and libraries so that students could benefit from online resources. But by the FCC's own reporting, that mission was largely accomplished by 2006. Today, E-rate persists as a multi-billion-dollar program reimbursing local governments for 20 to 90% of the cost of serving these eligible institutions. And despite this investment, we have no credible evidence that E-rate improves student performance. In fact, studies from North Carolina and California show that there's no measurable gains in SAT scores or state test results that are attributable to E-rate funding. So that makes it important to understand what the subsidy does influence. And here, its impact on market behavior and procurement is significant. First of all, E-rate eligibility drives demand, right? Districts are incentivized not to ask what technology best supports learning, but what will E-rate pay for? Because they know that for any E-rate eligible product, they can shift much of the cost to the Universal Service Fund. This prioritizes connectivity solutions over other potential tools. The Wi-Fi school bus experiment, I think, is an excellent example. I doubt very many districts would have funded such devices absent the FCC's encouragement. Now, vendors, in turn, may design offerings in order to match E-rate categories because aligning with the subsidy provides a competitive advantage. Secondly, E-rate has only a soft budget cap, which discourages discipline in spending. Because there's no real fixed appropriation, applicants have little incentive to economize. And that means we see any expansion in eligibility translates directly into higher USF surcharges on consumer phone bills. And then finally, with regard to procurement and vetting processes, these often become exercises in how do we navigate the E-rate paperwork rather than how do we evaluate educational value. E-rate's administrative complexity favors large districts that have procurement teams and IT staff who can navigate those rules better. So for small and under-resourced districts, which are the very communities that the program is supposed to be helping, they're much more likely to rely primarily on vendor advice or consultants rather than independently vetting technology choices. So the bottom line is that E-rate represents a $2.6 billion annual bet that more technology in the classroom is going to inherently enhance student performance. And while that bet shapes school and classroom pedagogical decisions, we have significant reasons to doubt this blanket assumption. The federal government has never seriously studied whether the technologies subsidized by E-rate actually improve learning, nor has it acknowledged the trade-offs that are associated with encouraging more screen time to children, both directly in the school and indirectly at home. The FCC has an Office of Economics and Analytics that's well positioned to address this question. Policymakers should be analyzing explicitly whether subsidizing additional connectivity and devices in schools will meaningfully advance educational outcomes, or whether it's simply accelerating a shift toward high-screen classrooms whose efforts on student well-being and on student performance remain uncertain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lyons. And now to also tee up our third topic, which is a focus on kids' data privacy and education technology platforms. In this topic, we're really interested to understand things like the current industry practices around the collection, storage, and use of children's data. To what extent are privacy laws such as FERPA, which focuses on educational contexts, or COPPA, which is a broader kind of multi-purpose children's online privacy and parental consent law, how do those affect the use of school technology? How are schools responding to those laws and the protections they're supposed to provide to children? And generally, what are the privacy risks and data security threats to children associated with the use of ed tech? To tee us up on this topic, I will now pass it over to Andrew Liddell from the Ed Tech Law Center.
Thank you, Emma. Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Liddell, co-founder of the Ed Tech Law Center, and I'm not being paid to be here today. By the traditional metrics used to evaluate educational success, the EdTech revolution has failed. Beginning in 2012, when so-called one-to-one programs began to go mainstream in the U.S., the steady gains that students had made in math, science, and reading over the previous 4 decades began to rapidly reverse. By 2025, scores had fallen to levels not seen since the 1970s, erasing more than 50 years of progress. Youth mental health is worse now than it has been in generations. And perhaps surprisingly, given that kids now spend most of their day on computers, they are even less computer literate today than they were just 10 years ago. As bad, our children's lives are being mined for vast corporate profit under cover of invented theories of consent. Worse still, kids are being harmed in immediate material ways through their school-issued computers. My law firm, the EdTech Law Center, solves problems where school meets technology. Our clients are kids who have been abused by sexual predators, blackmailed by strangers, mercilessly bullied by their peers, exposed to ultraviolence and pornography in class as young as 6 years old, and persistently distracted by platforms intentionally engineered to fracture and redirect their attention, all through one-to-one devices that their schools make them use and that their parents assume are safe. These felt harms are the negative externalities of a privacy-destroying business model that prioritizes data collection above all else, even above keeping children safe and helping them learn. Notice and consent is the foundational legal premise of the contemporary internet. But rather than disclose their data practices and get informed consent from children's parents, edtech companies have invented fake theories of consent that they claim allow them to take whatever information about kids they can get their hands on and use it however they wish. According to the industry, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, a law that gives kids under 13 greater privacy rights online, allows schools to stand in the shoes of parents and consent to unlimited corporate data collection about their kids, even over the actual parents' objections. The text of that law says nothing of the sort, but that hasn't stopped companies from promoting and profiting from this myth. EdTech companies have likewise distorted the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, forcing contracts of adhesion onto schools that deem the companies school officials that can collect information about kids without parent consent. Never mind that the schools don't control these companies, as they must control school officials. And never mind that as soon as the statutory school official rediscloses student information without consent, as these companies all do, that official status evaporates. The data collection business model has undermined public education and has harmed millions of kids and is premised on utter falsehoods about what the law is. EdTech and Big Tech measure success in terms of user engagement and time on device, not educational attainment or student safety. Big tech companies who sell into schools profit directly from students passively consuming content online on their school devices, and their algorithms push that content onto kids. These companies could design school computers to be only tools, but they choose not to, because that is not in their financial interest. Schools must stop being sites of pervasive, unaccountable corporate surveillance that directly undermines the freedom of thought that education is designed to nurture. And they must start prioritizing student safety and welfare over the empty promises by big tech and their many paid shills. That's what our kids deserve and what the law demands. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Andy. Now we are going to go to Denise Champney, who, Denise, are you going to try, we can try to enable your mic on your phone or on your Teams connection. I had been tracking your phone number, but just lost it from the queue, so If you're able to come off mute on either. Not hearing you. Okay. I'm so sorry about that. Unfortunately, I think we're going to move on to our next speaker. And Denise, very sorry that we haven't been able to get you connected, but please do, and this is an open invitation for anyone, please do follow up with any comments you want to share at kids@ntia.gov. Next up, I will go to Elizabeth Laird from CDT.
Great. Hey, everybody. I wanted to start by thanking NTIA and Emma for hosting today's listening session and providing the opportunity to provide commentary on behalf of the Equity and Civic Technology team at the Center for Democracy and Technology. CDT is a 30-year-old nonprofit, nonpartisan tech policy organization, and for this past 7.5 years, I have had the privilege of leading a team whose mission is to support the responsible use of data and technology by public agencies that are delivering public services, including education. In this role, I have been conducting 6 years of national representative polling of parents, students, and teachers about EdTech in schools. And our most recent report, entitled Hand in Hand, focused on the growing role of AI in schools and what it means for risk to students, including their privacy. We found that AI use in schools is at record levels. 87% of teachers say that they have used AI in at least one way in the past school year. 86% of students said that they have used it, half of which are using it for school-related reasons. I think relevant to today's conversation, the high school students who we surveyed are more likely to report that they are using AI for personal reasons rather than academic. But we also found that there is a spectrum of uses. There are some folks who, and some schools that are using it for a wide variety of reasons. And what we found is that the more ways that a school uses AI, the more concerned students are about things like AI treating them unfairly or exposing them to radical or extreme views that they wouldn't otherwise encounter. So to get real specific, we found that higher levels of AI use lead to higher instances of risk to students in 4 areas, one of which we're talking about today. And I'm going to start with that one. The more ways that AI is used in schools, the more likely a teacher is to report that that school experienced a large-scale data breach, so directly related to privacy implications. We also found that the more ways that AI is used in schools, the more likely that teachers and students are to report that they know about a deep fake being created of someone associated with their school. So I'm not talking about of a celebrity or a politician. I'm talking about a classmate. I'm talking about a parent. I'm talking about a teacher. And that also applies to a certain type of deep fake, which depicts someone in an intimate or explicit manner. That's also more common the more ways that AI is used in schools. The third risk that we found related to AI is that we are experiencing AI failures. And those include damaging community trust, a tool not working the way that it's intended. And all of those are more common the more ways that AI are used in school. And maybe you think, well, of course, if we're using it more ways, we should expect it to fail more often. But in a mission-driven organization where a failure of an AI tool means that it doesn't treat students fairly, I think it raises a legitimate question about whether that trade-off is worth it. And then finally, this has been brought up by other folks, but I did want to put some numbers on it. We found that the more ways that AI is used in schools, the more likely it is that students are having potentially troubling interactions with AI systems for personal reasons. So 42% of students who we surveyed said that they themselves or someone they know has turned to AI for companionship, as a way to escape real life, to seek mental health support. And 1 in 5 of the students who we surveyed said that they or someone they know has had a romantic interaction with AI. And all of those are more common the more ways that AI is used in a school setting. And just to further reiterate the role of schools in enabling some of these interactions, nearly a third of students say that they are having interactions with AI for personal reasons on school-provided resources. So to get to the funding question, in April of this year, the White House issued an executive order advancing artificial intelligence education for American youth, in which it committed to fostering AI competency among the nation's youth by promoting AI literacy and integration of AI into K-12 education. In this executive order, the Department of Education was directed to use formula and discretionary grant funds to improve education outcomes using AI. So when we saw this research, we and a coalition of other civil society organizations sent a letter to the Department of Education asking that they incorporate their own principles for responsible AI use, which they released earlier this year. It includes privacy, into their efforts to accelerate the deployment of AI in the classroom. So I want to use this time to reiterate that call now, given this administration's unprecedented attention to accelerating the deployment of AI in a number of areas, including K-12 schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Now we're moving on to Jared Hayden.
Hi, Emma. Can you hear me? Okay, great. I don't know if my video can show, but if not, that's fine. So I'll be speaking to the second section. I might have missed that, but so I'll be speaking to the funding. Thanks again to NTIA and to you, Emma, for hosting this important meeting. I'm Jared Hayden. I'm a policy analyst at the Institute for Family Studies, Family First Technology Initiative. As folks have mentioned already, EdTech has rapidly expanded in classrooms. As of 2023, less than 10% of teachers reported that their students did not have personally assigned digital devices for school use. And according to Instructure's EdTech Top 40 report for this past school year, the 2024-2025, the use of EdTech tools has nearly tripled since 2018. This expansion has occurred in large part, as others have noted as well, thanks to federal funding, both through the COVID pandemic, which awarded through which the Department of Education awarded $189.5 billion of emergency funds to local schools, 93% of which were spent on ed tech, including hardware, software, and connectivity. And so as my organization has outlined in a comment to one of the Department of Ed's proposed supplemental grant-making priorities, EdTech and its harms, we believe, will only continue to expand unless this administration ensures that funding for in-school technologies is administered in ways that ensure local and parental input, follow age-appropriate and evidence-based methods of integration, and protect students' flourishing and safety. The proposal is focused primarily on AI, specifically integrating AI technologies, not just AI literacy, into K-12 classrooms. And we generally agree, as the department outlined, that rapidly reshaping the future of education, work, and daily life, the AI is doing that, and that it's important for students to understand this and to be prepared for this. But as other friends of mine on this call have already noted, when it comes to technology in classrooms, more does not equal better. The list of AI harms for kids is growing, whether that's cognitive offloading and deleterious effects on critical thinking, providing dangerous dieting advice and instructions to make fentanyl, helping bullies create deepfake porn of peers, and even encouraging kids to take their own lives. Simply pumping more of this into classrooms without outlining appropriate methods of integration and safety standards will lead to more problems and harm. So really why I'm here is because we'd love to see NTIA ensure that federal funding for EdTech and AI in particular in schools is spent in ways that respect local and parental input and enable students to flourish both generally as well as in the age of AI, rather than just inundate them with more time on screens, and also developing, again, those harms and risks of dependency on AI companions. And while we understand that NTIA does not make the education policy, we respectfully urge that insofar as it does monitor and oversee federal funding for EdTech in schools, that it work to guarantee that those federal dollars are spent on integrating AI in particular in circumscribed, age-appropriate, evidence-based ways that protect student safety and well-being and help them really develop actual hard skills and critical thinking, much like we think, computer labs did in the early 2000s. So we look forward to continuing this conversation and with your agency as it considers how best to combat excessive screen time in schools. And we look forward, to keeping this conversation going. And thank you again for your time.
Great. Thank you, Jared. We'll go now to Amelia Vance and then pause at the end of our originally scheduled time, but folks in the queue, please do stick around. As I said, we will try to hold the phone line open for another 30 minutes or so to make sure we can hear from everyone who's currently in the queue. But Amelia, over to you.
Wonderful. Can everyone hear me? All
Yes,
right.
thank you.
Thank you. I'm Amelia Vance. Apologies, I couldn't add my organization into the chat. It wouldn't let me, but I've been focused exclusively on student and child privacy for about 13 years now, and I run the Public Interest Privacy Center, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization focused explicitly on these topics. I'm also an adjunct professor teaching privacy law at William and Mary Law School. FYI, since folks have brought it up, my nonprofit takes no funding from big tech. If anyone wants to know who our funders are, they're listed on our website. Over the past dozen years, I've partnered with youth, parents, schools, government agencies, companies, policymakers, and advocates to ensure responsible use of child and student data. Most of my time is spent supporting education organizations to have student privacy protections in place and in law while avoiding unintended consequences. Everyone cares deeply about students, and they want to ensure that kids are able to use tech when it will enhance learning. In particular, my expertise is on how to best balance the need for privacy with the need for child safety, access to educational opportunities. Trained originally as a lawyer and have focused on a lot of the student and child privacy laws at the federal and state levels, and there's a lot of them. There are over 140 student privacy laws in more than 40 states. So why are we still having very serious problems? We need training so people know about the laws. We need enforcement so there is a penalty when people violate the laws. And we desperately need modernization. Only 30 states directly regulate ed tech. FERPA is actually more protective than a lot of people think. It bans requiring parents to consent to a commercial tool that doesn't meet FERPA's privacy requirements. Essentially, schools cannot force parents to waive FERPA protections for their children using ed tech. But that prohibition isn't helpful if it isn't known and enforced. The good news is when I started this work, we had less than 50 resources in the world on student privacy, and a decade later, we have more than 500. Happy to share resources on any topic and from all perspectives as NTIA considers these issues. Just to finalize, I want to emphasize again that training is vital here. Even adults often shrug off privacy implications of information being collected. And educators, parents, and students themselves need to know when and why privacy concerns outweigh the benefits of, for example, tech that might get kids more excited about reading but is paid for through student data. Look forward to engaging more as you work on this issue.
Great. Thank you so much, Amelia. And that does bring us to the end of our original schedule for this session. We are going to hold the line open for another 30 minutes or so to hear from folks who are still waiting in the queue. And of course, you are all encouraged to share your insight, your research, good resources you think we should know about with us at kids@ntia.gov. That's kids@ntia.gov. Some quick thank yous on behalf of NTIA. I do want to thank everyone for joining us here today. We're so delighted with the robust turnout here. I want to thank Assistant Secretary Roth and Dr. Herodopoulos and our colleagues from the Office of the Surgeon General for working with us on tackling excessive screen time. I want to give a big shout out to our NTIA team who organized this session, including Chris Quarles, Rafi Goldberg, Whitney Eway, Nancy Haw, and Justice Shannon. We encourage you all to continue engaging with NTIA after we end today's listening session following our bonus time coming up. I'm sure we will have additional opportunities in the future for us to hear from you and to engage on this topic together. And if you have any questions or additional comments, please reach out to the team at that kids@ntia.gov address. This session's recording will be posted on the NTIA website. And with that, folks need to drop, understand, but highly encourage you to stay online to hear further comments from the folks in the queue. And now I will go back to Lisa Klein, who I believe is providing remarks on behalf of Joel Schwartz right now. Is that right, Lisa? Oh, are you able to unmute? Oh no, Lisa, we are not hearing you yet. It looks like the Teams unmuting curse has gotten to you as well. I'm so sorry about that. Let's maybe move on to the next speaker, and we can come back around to Lisa to see if there's any additional troubleshooting that we can do. So let's move on to John Bernstein.
Thanks, Emma. I appreciate you actually giving us extra time here to speak. I wanted to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about the E-rate program, which has come up quite a bit here, and I wanted to set the record straight in a few matters. I have been working on the E-rate program since it started, both on the outside for groups that cared about connectivity for schools and libraries, as well as inside the FCC and helping to manage it. Right now, I am co-chair of the Education and Libraries Networks Coalition, as well as the Homework App Coalition. These are groups comprised of the beneficiaries of E-rate. And the beneficiaries of E-rate, people should know, are not just public schools. They're also private schools and they're public libraries. In fact, it's one of the few tables in this town that they all sit around together. Couple things about E-rate that people should know. Number one, E-rate has always been a bipartisan program. It was actually started by a bipartisan group of senators. It was passed unanimously at the FCC, voted favorably in terms of its implementation on by folks who were both Democrats and Republicans. E-rate actually was started because schools and libraries were left out of the original subsidy system that provided discounts or subsidies for everyone in the United States to be connected to the Universal Service Fund. They were left out originally, but back in 1996, Congress rectified that situation and added public and private schools and libraries in. And E-rate's goal was not just to go to the wealthiest here. Its goal is to make sure that everybody is connected. In fact, the senators who initiated this program, by and large, were rural. They were from Maine, they were from West Virginia, and they were from Nebraska. A lot of people here talked about the perils of what E-rate connects to. And I'm sympathetic to those concerns. But E-rate is just about the connectivity part. E-rate only pays for internet access services. It pays for Wi-Fi and broadband. It occasionally pays for build-outs, but it doesn't pay for content or devices themselves. As such, E-rate has always been measured as a connectivity program. Its job is never going to be complete. It wasn't complete just because every classroom was connected at really dial-up speeds, very basic levels. Its job is never over until appropriate levels of connectivity are reached in terms of broadband, and there's always going to be continuous costs to pay monthly. Each school and library pays monthly for internet access. E-rate has to be used for educational purposes, but it's never been measured on educational goals. It's not supposed to be. It is a connectivity program in the way that we don't measure whether the rural healthcare program actually is measured on whether healthcare outcomes continue. It's whether hospitals are receiving broadband at appropriate levels there and appropriate costs. I will also note this as well. There are a lot of concerns about what connectivity delivers, but E-rate by law under the Children's Internet Protection Act, has to have, requires acceptable use policies for every school and library. Those acceptable use policies include technological protection measures that include blocking and filtering of inappropriate content. And by the way, the Wi-Fi hotspots and Wi-Fi in school buses that one of your speakers declaimed doesn't exist anymore. It was actually eliminated by the FCC back in September. There is no need for a Congressional Review Act. We disagree that those parts of the program should no longer be eligible for E-rate, but that has happened. I will also note that Wi-Fi hotspots, Wi-Fi on school buses, those would have all been fully blocked and filtered as well. So I appreciate you holding this, but I want everyone to understand that E-rate in and of itself is a connectivity program. It has nothing to do with screen time. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you, John. Next up, we're going to go to Derek in the queue. And Lisa, we'll try to loop back around to you, but let our team know if you need any help with troubleshooting on your end. In the meantime, Derek.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, really appreciative of your words, John. I actually had joined the queue to make a similar point. So I actually had the privilege of serving in a couple of districts in Southern California as their director of technology. So I think I may be the only person on this call who has filed for E-rate funding, and wanted to set the record straight again. I was really excited to join a listening session on excessive screen time and was kind of surprised to see it take a partisan turn on E-rate. So yeah, as a career educator and administrator, I wholeheartedly agree that we need to place the burden of proof on tech companies here. And furthermore, we need a sober approach, to AI that acknowledges that AI is going to be a force in our students' lives, and the careers that they'll inherit. But we also recognize that it's a technology with unique risks. But with that, I think we need to be pretty clear-eyed about some of the implications of some of the speakers, previous speakers' downstream effects of a potential, E-rate wipeout on the table. So yeah, as John mentioned, E-rate requires schools to be compliant with SIPA, and SIPA requires technology protection measures. So these are things like filtering and blocking of those malicious websites. It also requires the delivery of digital citizenship curriculum. So Common Sense Media is the clear leader here. So if we removed E-rate, we would be removing the primary vehicle by which schools have carrots and sticks for implementing digital citizenship and important protection measures. But importantly, E-rate does not fund either of those. So it actually is requiring, by virtue of receiving those funding, it requires schools to be able to pay for digital curriculum, digital citizenship curricula, and those content filters. As a primer for anybody not familiar with E-rate, as John kind of alluded to, if E-rate funding falls under two categories. Category 1 is subsidized internet services, and Category 2 is network infrastructure. So that's things like network switches, firewalls, wireless access points. It's not ed tech tools. It's not software. As somebody who has worked in districts that needed funding, I wish it was some of those things because we're starved for funding. But it's not. So if an awful lot is connected to the internet. So if we removed E-rate subsidies for schools and libraries, we'd be removing many, many features that keep students safe, including the firewalls that I mentioned, but also things that you might not realize are connected to the internet, like security cameras and door access control. There's a lot that is networked these days, and E-rate is the vehicle by which schools are able to pay for it and subsidized according to their free and reduced status, in proportion to that. So the poorer schools whose students and faculty would not have the safety measures of having internet access at all for the day-to-day job, but also being able to have things like digital cameras and door access control now have an opportunity and a place at the table in a bipartisan way, as John mentioned. So.
Thanks very much, Derek. I appreciate that. We're going to go back to Lisa Klein to see if we can get you unmuted. Lisa, are you able to come off mute?
How's that?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm alive. Yay, thank you. I am back to be Joel Schwartz. I'm not an attorney like Joel. He is a fellow advocate. He and I have worked for years together in our school district. But boy, he can run circles around so many people I know in terms of data privacy. He's an expert. So I have his testimony. He's on the Hill today, actually doing some stuff on child data protection. So he asked me to voice over some of his thoughts here. So Joel, and he's a father of 4. He is a former U.S. government cybercrime prosecutor and intelligence officer. And he is now a private cybersecurity consultant and adjunct law professor. He and I, and a few others here that spoke today, co-founded the Student Data Privacy Project, which is a parent-led nonprofit, nonprofit_. We received no money to do the work that we did. So Joel would like to tell us all that we all know the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, was created to protect children by limiting disclosure of their personal information in schools. But FERPA was enacted in the 70s, long before the internet came along, and long before data mining practices became the norm. Textbooks were hard copies, and companies could not track children like they do today. So today, ed tech companies have all this and more. They vacuum up student data to build detailed dossiers for sale to third parties, including data brokers. And mining that data is profiteering, and they're doing all this targeting and tracking without any oversight. The Department of Education has taken no formal action, pretty much ever. There's been one case, but they've taken no action against this exploitative practice that EdTech continues on a daily basis. So that brings us to the key point: absent oversight. EdTech is gobbling up children's data at an alarming rate. And it's not just Google. Giant private players like Vista Equity Partners are acquiring massive portfolios of ed tech companies, with the goal being to gain access to even more student data and boost shareholder profits. They already own major platforms such as PowerSchool, Naviance, Schoology, and School Messenger, plus literally dozens more. Why? Because data is money. It is the new oil. It is mined, it is enriched, sold, and used to target students ever more precisely. But this data is intrinsically different. It's sensitive data, primarily underage minor data, and it's collected without parent consent or even awareness. And our children are frequently compelled to use the products. Bottom line, if we want our kids' futures free from third-party search histories, third grade search histories, youthful mistakes, and exposed feelings, we must do better for them. Therefore, we ask NTIA to work with the executive and legislative branches to restrict what data edtech companies are allowed to compile and aggregate, place clear, explicit limits on how long it's retained, and impose stricter rules on sharing and selling data. We also ask NTIA to work with edtech to establish privacy-centric commitments, including regular audits, spot checks, and transparency. Through these actions, we can protect our children by preventing their data from being mined, profile, track, and target them today, or from prejudicing them tomorrow. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Joel and Lisa, for delivering Joel's remarks.
Thank you.
Next up, we will go to Rick Lane.
Hi, everyone. And first of all, I want to thank NTIA for having this amazing meeting, and especially Assistant Secretary Roth for taking up this important issue. My name is Rick Lane, and I volunteer my time advising child safety and parents groups on technology policy. On September 2nd, 1994, over 30 years ago, I co-founded the Modern Educational Technology Center as a private-public partnership and teacher training site that included IBM, Discovery Communications, Suburban Hospital, the Montgomery County Teachers Association, and the Montgomery County PTA. What I've learned in my 31 years from experience is that incorporating technology into the classroom without fully understanding the impact of that technology on a child's learning experience is not only a waste of educational resources that only benefits those selling educational technology services, but for younger children, research has shown that over-reliance in technology can undermine a child's academic performance and mental health. Beyond the concerns already raised, there is also a national security concern that must be addressed. As we have seen with TikTok and DeepSeek, it matters which companies and countries control the inputs, outputs, and design choices of the underlying AI that can influence what a user sees and ultimately thinks. We cannot allow AI policy and the power of AI technology and bots, especially at the local and state level, to become a backdoor for accessing and shaping the minds of our children, or be able to use the data they collect from our children to strengthen and improve their own AI models that could be used against US national security interests. Although the decision-making process regarding how educational technologies are used in the K-12 classroom must be handled at the state and local levels, a federal role should exist in identifying and banning companies and products that pose a national security threat, just like the Federal Communications covered list of equipment and services that pose national security risks. We have seen both the benefits and the real harm that children are currently facing as a result of technological revolution that began in the early 1990s. We must learn from our past mistakes, as technology for technology's sake is not always beneficial. Without legal guardrails and parental control as to how their child interacts with AI in the classroom, technology companies will promise the world and take money without regard for the potential harm AI technologies cause to our children. We have an opportunity to do this the right way and enjoy the benefits of AI without compromising the mental health and future of our children. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Rick. Next, we will go to Emily Churkin, who is going to be the voice of Denise Champney for us. Emily, are you able to unmute?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I am going to do Denise justice. This is her statement that she was unable to read. Denise Champney is a speech and language pathologist with 25 years experience working in the public school setting. She is not funded by tech, and she witnesses daily the harms created by screens in schools and urges the NTIA to follow the funding behind the push for ed tech. In 2013, Bill Gates proclaimed, "It would be great if our education stuff worked, but we won't know that for probably a decade." But a look at the recent NAEP report card and student performance over the past 10 years reveals that it has not worked. Bill Gates openly talks of a future where children are taught by AI chatbots. We need to follow the money and his influence to understand how we got to the screen-saturated classrooms of today. Around 2010, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation began investing hundreds of millions of dollars into developing the Common Core standards in the name of preparing students to be college and career ready, opening up the floodgates to tech in schools. That same year, the National Education Technology Plan boasted technology-based learning and assessment systems will be pivotal in improving student learning. Also in 2010, Google released its first Chromebook in a pilot program to a handful of schools. Today, over 50 million students are using them, including kindergartners. Follow the timeline and you will see the pattern. Tech giants such as Gates, Dell Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative began investing more money into the education ecosphere, and curriculum developers took notice of the growing market value of digital learning platforms. Publishing companies such as McGraw-Hill, HMH, and Pearson began purchasing software companies and shifting their products from paper to digital formats. As a result, big tech integrated itself further into education. Here is the crux of the issue. Now, not only are the tech giants funding the creation of standards to educate children, they've created and fund organizations such as Ed Reports to determine which ed tech products are considered high-quality curriculum materials. Today, at least 12 state education departments use Ed Reports as the gold standard when determining what curriculum can be used in their states. Additionally, Gates and others in the tech industry also fund the digital progress monitoring programs that require students as young as 5 to be evaluated at least 3 times a year using online digital programs. As a result, the tech industry is determining the standards, influencing the curriculum, and creating the programs that are used to evaluate students. But it doesn't stop there. Follow the money of the funding sources and partners of many organizations that are supposedly in charge of the decision-making for educating our young children, and you will see the same familiar names: Gates, CZI, Dell, etc. Groups such as the ISTE, CAST, and COSIN all receive funding from the tech industry. Worse, tech funding is linked to the School Superintendent Association, the American Library Association, and even the National Parent-Teacher Association, whose sponsors include Meta, TikTok, and Discord. Even worse, this funding can also be tied to the research that edtech companies use to push their products to schools in the name of education. Big tech has infiltrated education, and they profit while students suffer. Organizations entrusted to guide and support education are sadly captured as well. The tech industry has anchored itself into the education system where children are compelled to attend, creating users for life. We must untangle the web. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Denise, and thank you, Emily, for delivering those. And then last in our queue is Libby Milkovich.
Hi, all. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I appreciate you being flexible. I am in the middle of clinic. I'm a developmental and behavioral pediatrician who also does digital media research. And I am a co-author on the upcoming American Academy of Pediatrics digital media policy. And I'm also an ambassador of the Center of Excellence of Social Media and Youth Mental Health. I am representing myself and not the other organizations that I'm a part of. Because everybody else is mentioning it, which I think is really important to state, I am not paid to be here. I am here on my own. I wanted to speak last because I loved listening and hearing all the input from all these amazing speakers that have fabulous perspectives. As I mentioned, I'm a neurodevelopmental pediatrician, and so I see firsthand the harms from ed tech. That includes one of my patients who is 13, and his porn addiction has been reinforced by accessing school issue devices. But I've also seen the benefit, and that is through kids that have not been able to express their creativity in other ways. without school issue devices. And so the one piece that I wanted to add is I think the piece that's missing is implementation, us discussing the implementation, the importance of implementation. And that means whether it's digital media policy, we need to think about the implementation of it, or digital media tools or educational pieces. It's all about, a big piece of it is the implementation. So for example, although I am very interested and support limited cell phone access during the school day, I have witnessed and I am studying how implementation of cell phone ban policies without sufficient support creates harm as well. That might be not able to be captured, such as student, parent, and teacher distress. And so my ask is, if when considering policies or statements, that the implementation aspect could be funded and supported as well, not only the policy itself. So that is my ask.
Great. Thank you very much, Libby. And with that, our queue is empty. Thank you all so much for joining today, for sharing your perspectives, for staying an extra 23 minutes into the rest of the afternoon. We really appreciate your engagement. And as I said before, this is far from the only listening session or engagement that we will be having on this topic. We are very excited to continue the conversation that we had today and to hear more from each of you. If you have questions, more resources for us, more research, anything else to share with us, or want to get in touch for a deeper conversation, please do reach out to our team at kids@ntia.gov. And thanks again to everyone who helped make this event possible. And with that, I will stop talking and leave you all to the rest of your afternoons. Thank you very much.